Hi guys, welcome to Invesrep and hope you guys are having an absolutely great day. Hope you guys had a great holiday. That's why we've been quiet. I actually took a break myself. And now we're back and we're going to start the new year with a bang. Literally. Starting with a bang, today's start of the show. Everyone's been waiting for these guys. So this is our tiger morph blackheaded python. As you can see, what makes him a tiger morph, he's probably going to take a jab at me. Weirdly enough, they barely bite. You can see they just headbutt because they actually mimic taipans. And the mission with that is he doesn't want to bite me because I'm going to realize he's non-venomous. So they all show, but getting them established is quite a nightmare. Probably going to have another go at me. Okay, but we'll get into these. I actually got a beautiful little normal, and once you put a normal next to these guys, then it's day and night on how much they differ. Okay, so for today's episode, we're going to discuss the most 5 essential items that you need if you want to keep snakes or reptiles. And very basic, it's not going to cost you a lot of money. Well, depending on the first subject is going to cost you a lot of money, and that's all on how much you can afford, what you want to spend. And the first thing that you need before you can acquire any reptile whatsoever, doesn't matter if you're taking an arid species, a tropical species, a boreal, whatever, you need one of these. Not a Repticube, an enclosure. I would recommend a Repticube. These are the best enclosures I've ever worked with in my life. The ventilation works in them, the insulation works on them. I'm going to do a whole entire episode. There is actually one of our buddies that won. I'm going to put the link down below to his channel, and you can actually go look at what he's got to say about these Repticubes. But these guys are made out of PVC, which lasts forever. They look amazing, and what I do love about them is the way the door opens. I can open the door, clean the outside and the inside without struggling getting the cloth behind and all that. So just keeping my doors clean, and they come standard with barrel lock. So I've got full control over these enclosures at all times. So I can decide who's got access to what's enclosures, and running a facility, that's pretty crucial. Okay. But you do get cheaper options. Cheaper options meaning wood. Wood works well, and we've been using wood for decades in South Africa, and it's always worked. I won't use the word last. Once that water bowl gets tipped over or something spoils in the cage is gone. So wood works well, insulation and security wise, because it does. You don't want a 360 view for your reptile. He wants to feel safe and secure. And wood does offer that. And then the last option is glass. I'm not a huge fan. Those guys, go look through our channels. I actually did an enclosure about the wrong enclosures, and I was actually using a fish tank as an example. Why we should not be using fish tanks. Inadequate ventilation. They can escape easily. And the last thing you want for your pet reptile, once you get home, the next morning you wake up and there's no more pet reptile. It does happen, and you can control it. I always say, as long as you control something, you're fine, you're safe. There's just some things you can't control, for example, hunger strikes or something like that. But as long as you can control, you're fine. So the first thing you need to decide is your enclosure and size versus enclosure. I'll actually do a whole thing about how you determine the enclosure size for the reptile or snake that you want to keep. There's a basic recipe that we follow, and it's like buying, especially when you buy a hatchling or neonate, it's like buying shoes for a 5-year-old. You're not going to buy him a size 4 when he's wearing a 4. You're probably going to buy a 5 because he's going to grow into it so fast, and then by the time he gets to a 5, you're going to buy a 6. And then once eventually you get to a stage where, if I'm wearing a size 9 at the age of 42, almost 43, and my shoes, my feet's not going to grow or get smaller now. It's going to stay a 9. So I'm going to wear a size 9 shoes. I've been wearing size 9 shoes for over 22 years. Actually more if I think about it, since high school. Okay, so enclosures, number 1, make sure you make the right choice. And if you can spend as much money as you can towards your enclosure, because that's going to be your lifetime investment for that reptile. So it's pretty critical to make sure it counts the first time. Okay, number 2, I always talk about temperature controlling, making sure your temperature's on par. That determines if you're going to be sitting with a thriving, healthy reptile or a sick, respiratory infected, stressed out animal. So the first thing you need to do is monitor the heat. We'll get you the heating now, but you want to monitor and control the heat. And what you need to do that, what you need to do that is get one of these. This is a thermostat. People confuse thermostats with thermometers. Thermostats controls your heating element. In other words, if I set it at 32 degrees Celsius, if it gets to 32 degrees Celsius on the heating element, it switches off. And it's going to do a little curve. It's going to go below. It's go below 32. It switches back on and just keeps it there wherever you adjust it, that point. So that's pretty crucial. So you must have, for me, in the top 5, number 2 on my list is a thermostat. You need to control your heat. You can't do unregulated heat because of the unpredicted temperatures we've got in South Africa. We've got extreme summers and extreme winters. And then we get heat waves as well. And if you're in the office and you've got your heating element on without a thermostat, and if we hit those 40s or 38s, like we did in Johannesburg now recently, you're going to lose your reptile. So you want something that telling the computer it's getting too hot, switch off all heating elements in this enclosure immediately. That's going to save your snakes or your reptiles' life. Thermostats are crucial. It's not even a negotiable. For me, it's a must. Okay. Then heating. I've explained in so many of my videos about heating options. Personally, I love these ceramic heating methods. These small ones, they work well. I mean, even my RC120s, you can see at the back there. Small little, this is the 80 watt. So this thing emits 80 watt of heat. That's quite a bit of heat. Once again, if I regulate it, it lasts forever, runs well, works well, and it gives me ambient temperature. So I'm a huge fan of the heat emitters. But you get heating pads as well. You get those typical foil ones. They're pretty inexpensive. You get the one that looks like carbon fiber. You get the FlexiWatt heat tape. Infrared heat bulbs. There's so many options. I'm going to go into the pros and cons because this is not what this talk's about every heating element. But the site and the heating element, do some homework. I actually have done a whole little thing on the heat emitters, and I've done on the very first videos on the basics on what different heat options you've got with the advantages and disadvantages. But personally, I stick to this. Okay, so now we've got our enclosure, we've got our heat, and we're controlling it. So now we've got the basics. Remember, this is the essential equipment. Doesn't matter what species, whether I put an arid or tropical species, a hot keeper, a cooler, whatever I decide on, I've got my basics covered now. So now I can do anything with that, and I can work from there. I can now go choose, do I want to go live vivarium? Do I want to go artificial with newspaper, paper toweling, what substrate, all of that? That's not essentials, that's choices. And you can just play with that. You can go as eccentric as you want, or you can go as clinical, clean as you want. That's your choice. Okay. Then on the temperatures and controlling everything, doesn't matter. So your probe will normally be on the hot side where it's going to be controlling the heating element from there. But what's happening in the rest of your enclosure? What's happening in the rest of the room? So one of the first cheapest options that you can go for is just a normal thermometer, not these dial ones. They don't work. We've checked them out. They can be out by 5 to 7 degrees out the box from the factory. They're unreliable, and as time goes on, they actually get more unreliable. You can get online shopping. There's a lot of reptile shops that keep them. Is the digital one. The digital one does tend to be within 1.5 to 2 degrees from what it stipulates at the probe. And basically the purpose of that is you want to regulate, you don't want to regulate, we're already doing that at the thermostat, sorry about that. You want to check your temperatures in your enclosure. What's my hot spot doing? What's my cold spot doing? I personally, I'm a big fan of these guys. Temperature guns. Temperature guns, all I do is wherever I want to check what's my temperature, I just zoom it, gives me my temperature reading. I must say you guys are pretty hot, 33. So this is just super fast, super simple, and I can check the front side of my enclosures, But right now it's running at 24.5, which is exactly, I've got it at 25. So I'm spot on the money, 24.7, 24.8. So I'm running exactly what I want to run, and I can check it with this, and I can make adjustments to either the room or my hotspots according to this, because where the probe is normally, let's say, set at 32, doesn't mean your hotspot is exactly 32. Your hotspot can be a lot hotter or a lot colder than what you think. And this takes all the guessing work out of that. So, and they're pretty inexpensive. You can get them from 350. This is more of an industrial type, a Unity. I think I paid 650 or 750 Rand for it. And I'll tell you what, it made its money back on the first season, without a doubt. It's one of my best buys. Even when I'm traveling with snakes up on long distances, I take this and I can actually check at the garages, check if I'm still, because some people don't even realize exhaust heat and gearbox heat. You've got no idea how much heat is coming through that, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And this lets me control the situation. Okay, so I can always move them. And then last but not least is your handling equipment. You can't always, in all conditions, whether you're working with venomous or non-venomous, be hands-on with your reptiles. When it comes to aggressive pythons or keeping venomous, one of the first things I'll recommend, get yourself a hook stick. So this is quite a big hook stick, so I'm going to have to go through the camera, but and this is pretty short actually compared to what I've got. I've got mini hook sticks that I use for my neonate and hatchling venomous type snakes, but this is my all-round. I've got a bigger one that I actually use for call-outs when I do snake removals in the area, but this works very well when I've got an aggressive snake, or when I want to test if the snake is in a feeding mode or just in a friendly mode. And this normally tends to wake them up and say, listen here, I'm not food, I just want to check how's your day going and if you're still all right. Okay, and then I can actually take them out. And even if you've got an aggressive snake, you can still keep it away from you. You can keep the sharp end away with the hook. So hook sticks, I'm a huge fan of hook sticks. It's the minimal stress that you can put on that animal, and they're generally easy to use, and you'll figure out every species got a trick that they want to do. Some want to come back on the hook, some hook themselves, some you just pick up and they park there. So you learn very fast on how they should react on a hook stick. But this is essential, and obviously this is not going to work for hatchlings and neonates. You're going to make a smaller one, but those are super easy. You can take a piece of aluminum, about 30 centimeters, bend the hook at the end like that, and you can use that to pick up your little snakes. So they work very well. I use that for my dwarf beaters. I've got a little, it's about a 30 centimeter, 35 centimeter hook stick that I use for my dwarf beaters, the hatchlings and all of that. Okay, then something not as crucial, but when you're working with certain species, is pretty crucial, is a tong. So these are Midwest tongs, the gentle giant, and obviously I'm working a lot with pythons and heavy-bodied vipers, so this helps me quite a bit. It doesn't put as much stress on the snake, on the rib section, all that, and it's pretty gentle, like the name says. It's a gentle giant, and I actually use this mostly for call-outs, tricky situations, puff adders. I normally use a hook stick for puff adders. This works just as well for puff adders, especially if they're behind the fence and they're close to a hole or close to a boundary where you can't get access into easily. And we're pretty dense here, so sometimes I've got to act quick. But yeah, so these are tongs, and you can actually use these tongs for bigger aggressive or bigger non-venomous or venomous snakes to even feed them. So you can actually take the rat tail in there and actually introduce the food via quite a distance. Okay, so not a bare essential, but I would rate them as something that you can get in your handling equipment category. Okay, so we've covered the hook stick, we've covered the grab stick or the tongs, and then last but not least, these guys. Feeding tweezers. So I've got the big ones and the small ones. Obviously the big ones I use for either things that's a bit bigger, it's got a bit more of a strike range. Sometimes I'll even put a glove on. I actually forgot, I didn't put a glove on the one day, and the Woma actually missed the rat on these tongs and got this finger over here. And I'll tell you one thing I realized, I can give a pretty good yelp. It was painful. So now I actually wear a welding glove with these when I'm feeding the bigger stuff. The problem is you don't have a lot of control at the end here, especially pinks and all that. You tend to squash them. And if you're going to feed something day-old pinks, they don't have the strike range yet. So I use smaller ones. I control it a lot better, and it just makes my life a lot easier. So 2 sets of that, depending on what species you work with. Otherwise, if you don't have the money or you don't have the time, get something in between these two. So these are probably the biggest that you get. I think these are 60 centimeters, and these are normal, I think 25 centimeters. You can get something in the middle, okay? But these are pretty crucial. Saves you a lot of fingers, a lot of pain, and it also makes feeding a lot easier. So let's just recap. So the top 5 things you need before you get a reptile, and it needs to be in your snake room, is number 1, your enclosure. Number 2, your thermostat to control your heat, your heating elements, your thermometer or your temperature gun that you can monitor outside the probes, and then obviously your handling equipment. So that's a very quick little show for today, and that's like an entry level for the year to come. We've got some great things coming your way. So guys, please, if you do like this, like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll keep you updated on everything that happens in the reptile industry. Till then, look after yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.